Treasure Mountain Inn. We're going to be talking about Sundance and Slamdance films from 2023. With me is Angela Tabora and Erin from Bitch Talk. My name is John Wildman. I'm the editor-in-chief for filmsgonewild.com. And our film on this segment is with Peter Bradley. It's a screening of Slamdance, a documentary directed by Alex Rappoport, who's with us. And we also have composer Javon Jackson with us. Welcome to the show, you guys.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
Okay, we start this thing off the same way every darn time. Alex, you get to tell our audience about the film and introduce it, because they haven't seen it as yet, so tell us.
Yeah, I need to get better at doing that. It's a feature documentary. It's a portrait piece about Peter Bradley, obviously, who's a now 82-year-old black abstract painter and sometimes sculptor, who happens to live like a 5 or 6 minute drive from me in Saugerties, New York, which is a town of less than 20,000 people in the Hudson Valley. And Peter, like myself, I like to say we're sort of creative rent refugees, you know, out of New York City. I've been there for 20 years and Peter for, I guess, at least 25. And so we met through a local art gallerist. And the film is really just a simple, intimate experience. Peter and I were the only people involved. He's the only person on screen, except for his cat. And it just sort of developed organically. I didn't really have anything in mind. So the feel of the piece is we weave back and forth between moments of Peter working with his process and talking about his art with him. Really, it's a film memoir. You know, Peter's talking about his life the entire time. So those chapters of Peter's life we kind of get through as we progress through the film. That was a long-winded way of answering that.
It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, that was perfect. And I'm glad you mentioned he's the only one on camera, because it feels like so many people and things are on camera because his life encompasses so much. So I'm curious to know how you even began to tell a concise story in one film for somebody who's lived so much, and were there parts of his story that you had to leave out?
Well, there's a lot of great anecdotes that got left out, some involving famous people. Peter, one of the great things that people enjoy about watching Peter is he becomes a kind of Zelig-like figure, someone that had connections with a lot of known figures in art and culture and music in particular. So yeah, and I don't get into Peter's personal life really. I just didn't feel like that's a story I'm qualified to tell. And it wasn't so interesting to me in terms of my focus was just to sort of see this portrait of a creative person at work. And he told us plenty of other details about his life as well. It was a challenge, you know, it took me 2.5 years to edit it. The fun and games was shooting it. That was great fun, just hanging out with the camera with Peter. But a lot of time to figure out a structure that works and a time, you know, generally. And a big part of the film working structurally has to do with the music that Javon composed. An incredible original jazz score performed live by his quintet. And it's really a whole other character in the film. It's just there with us the whole time.
Yeah, let me jump in really quickly because, you know, it's not often that we do these shows and we get late breaking news kind of things, but we do have this because in this case, Javon here just was nominated for an NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Jazz Album for the Gospel Accordion Nikki Giovanni. So congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
Very cool. But yeah, let's talk about, because I mean, I spoke extensively with Annie Jeeves, your publicist, about the music in this film and loving the music in this film. And it's not just great music, but it really is enmeshed in the story of Peter Bradley's life. So please, Javon, talk about your approach to it.
Right. Well, fortunate in this situation that I've known Peter my whole adult life. I joined the great Art Blakey eons ago when I was 21. And during that time, I met Peter Bradley. And Peter would come to performances we would do in New York City. And he and I became friends. He loved to talk about saxophone players and trumpet players and some of his favorites. And he and I began a friendship. And so after Art Blakey passed away, I would call him and say, Peter, I'm playing here, blah, blah, blah. I'm recording on 20th Street. I'll be there. And every time he would show up. So I've known him. He would come to performances, and I'd say, "Hey, he's a really great dresser." I said, "Where'd you get that ascot?" One time he took it off, handed it to him. So I've known him for all those years and gotten a chance to kind of have a window into some of his likes and dislikes. And then for a period of years we just hadn't spoken. He had moved to Socrates, as Alex just mentioned. And one morning, a person called me. I'm an artistic director at a jazz festival in Poughkeepsie, New York. And she said, "Hey, somebody wants to talk to you." And he says, "Hey, you know who this is?" I said, "Peter Bradley." I hadn't talked to him forever. But the crazy thing is, all these years, I never knew he was an artist. He never talked about his art. So I never knew until I went up to visit. He said, "When are you going to come see me?" And whenever he'd ask me, I would always go see him at his, he used to live on Jane Street in the city, in the village, New York City, sorry. There's a lot of cities in New York City, but there's only really on one city. But anyway.
That's another conversation.
I know, we're going to leave that out. Well, everybody knows the city of New York.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I would always go visit him on Jane Street in the village, but then I drove up to Socrates and I saw all of his work. And then I got a chance to meet Alex. I had a concert during that time, and Peter, as usual, I told him I was playing, he showed up and he brought Alex, and at that time I got an opportunity to speak to Alex about Alex's interest in me doing the writing for the film. So it was an honor. It was a long-winded answer to say it was a true honor, and to work with Alex and try to help him with his vision. But then Peter, I know him, so I kind of was able to write a melody for him because I know him. So that kind of helped in that way.
Alex, I want to say how lucky or maybe arduous it was to have that much archival footage throughout the film. Can you talk about the amount that is in the film, and also when you were talking with Peter and he was telling these stories, and it was, you know, in the moment it's great and you're hearing them, but then you go back to the editing room, you're like, oh, do I have photos from this? Is there video from this? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so, you know, I wore every hat on the film except for the hat of the composer. So I did all the research myself as well, which started with kind of a box of random things that Peter had that was his archive, everything from childhood photos to slides of artwork, you know, from decades ago, to, you know, little newspaper clippings and things. Peter didn't save a lot. You know, Peter's a kind of guy that moved around a lot over time. And he didn't have a lot of photos. Some of the best photos he had were these nice black and white prints, some of them 8x10 prints that I could tell were professional photos. And he started telling me about his friend, the photographer, Adger Cowens. And Adger is actually a few years older than Peter. They've known each other since the 1960s. And the best archival photos I have of Peter from the 60s and 70s are Adger's. And so his photos were really the most crucial archival I had to tell Peter's story visually. Adger came on as an executive producer after he saw the film and loved it so much and wanted to do whatever he could to help. I said, well, there's something called an executive producer. and so he was like, yeah, absolutely. And Adger's coming. I'm sorry he's not here now. He's en route and will be here in a couple of hours. But it was a lot of tracking things down, you know, some Getty images, but then just looking around. Thankfully, we have the internet, and it's easy to Google search, but lots of phone calls to different institutions trying to find photos of Peter's work, etc. And then, what was the other part of your question? About...
I think you answered that.
Yeah,
I did?
Yeah,
Okay.
It's mostly about archival,
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, and I think there's a wonderful balance between what you deliver to us in terms of his history and aspects throughout his career where he had to deal with systemic racism in getting his art shown and blockades that he faced that of course should not have been there, and you know, as well as seeing the process, his artistic process, which is wonderful when we can see that. But I have to tell you, for me, one of the distinctive things about the film that I loved was the moments that you have where he is assessing his own work that he's just done, and he's pleased with himself. And it's great. It's great for, you know, how he goes, yeah, I like this one. This is great. And we rarely see that kind of an artist assessing their own work because they're usually so guarded. And so congratulations on that. I think that makes the film just that much more special.
Well, yeah, I mean, Peter was so open and genuine and really remarkable as a subject in front of a camera. I was telling someone recently, I can't think of one instance in going through all the footage, which I shot over, I think, 40 different days, 20 interviews at least. He never looked to the lens once. He only was looking at me. And so for him to just forget about that apparatus is pretty remarkable. And yeah, it's great being around Peter, because number one, when he talks about his art, it's with a complete lack of pretension. Is that the right word? Pretense?
Yeah.
You know, it's just, that's what he does. He kind of talks a bit more about at a craft level. And he has this childlike excitement about him when he sees what his work is doing. Because there's a living aspect in a way to the paint. When Peter puts it down, he uses very watered down acrylic paints, and they move, they're alive. The paint takes a while to do what it's going to do, and sometimes over days and weeks. And so him always coming back and seeing what happened, you know, but he likes his paintings.
It is really fun to watch him dance with colors, and I love his explanation of when he hears the music, he sees a color for that music. And I was wondering, Javon, does that kind of work as a composer sort of inversely for you? Like, do you see an image and it reminds you of a sound or a particular instrument?
I do agree with that. I do see an individual, I could look at you or look at someone and you see a color or you see a sound. So I agree, a lot of those statements that he makes really do ring true. And again, that's the musician in him, because I think he was a budding trumpet player at one point, or a musician, and he loves music. So he really knows specifically the jazz canon and the art form. He really is able to speak about it. I definitely agree with that aspect of that conversation.
It's a wonderful introduction to Peter Bradley, to the folks that are not familiar with him. He should be very happy with what you've done, Alex.
Peter's always been my biggest fan.
Again, the title of the film is With Peter Bradley, which is screening at Slamdance. We've been talking to the director, Alex Rappoport, and the composer, Javon Jackson. Again, Javon, congratulations for your Image Award nomination.
I appreciate it. And there's no city. That just meant New York City.
It's true. I'm sorry, but he's right.
No, New York's great.
No, we get it.
We get it.
Wait, Javon, okay, so what sounds are we?
What sound?
What sound, colors? You
What
said you
color?
could see. Like,
Well, you look like a solid D flat major.
I am.
D flat is supposed to be like in my opinion, like one of the most soulful keys.
Oh, what an honor! Thank you.
Nice. Can't end it better than that.
He doesn't.
You may do you? I can
Sure.
do you.
This is like an aura, but like a music aura.
I like it. Yeah.
Reading. We're all in.
Solid D minor.
Okay.
Oh.
There you go.
And Coltrane wrote a piece called Impressions. That was in D minor.
That's all you had to say was John.
Fire.
I'll
Yeah,
use that.
yeah.
Oh, she's fire. That's true.
Now, do I have to do John? Or
I mean,
you're okay with that? He already knows his. He knows his key setter.
All right.
great. So who's buying this film? Seriously, like who's?
You know,
your-
we're gonna see what happens. The whole time making this, I just did it because it was so much fun, and I started before COVID, but then it became a COVID project where it really saved my life psychologically to be able to focus on Peter
Yep.
for that period of time. I hope it finds an audience. I'm sure it will.
It will.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
most definitely.
So we'll see.
We need this out
Easy.
there.
Easy.
All right, let's go take a picture, you
Yes,
guys.
please.
I just want to sit and talk about this film.